Okay, now you've gotten to overtime. How do we win in overtime? This is Dr. Ron Kaiser, and this is the Winning in Overtime series in the Growing Older with Enthusiasm podcast. And I'm going to turn it over now to my co-host, Neil Haley, who's going to, as usual, interview me. And let's talk about impediments to winning in overtime once you've gotten to overtime.
Yeah. So once you get to overtime, you have to say, Yay, I made it. But what are the impediments?
Well, there's some real problems from a mindset standpoint. In other words, just like some teams get to overtime, basketball or football or whatever, and they seem to be satisfied to get there and not realize the game is still on. And I think the same thing happens in overtime, that a lot of times people have done well throughout their lives, well in various ways, physically, financially, proud of their family and so on, and just assumed they would reach a particular time, they would retire, and everything would fall into place. So the fact that there wasn't planning really is a problem. And for a lot of people, dealing with an unstructured life, not having a place to go, not having somebody assign work to you or having clients or patients or whatever. Um, for many of them, they haven't built in an adequate alternative. So to recognize when you get to overtime, you don't want to be one of the impediments. You want to be able to say, okay, I can enjoy life a little more. I may have a little more free time and so on, but I need to exercise a degree of self-discipline to make sure that I'm doing the appropriate things from an exercise, eating, socializing standpoint, so that I actually continue to win in overtime so my body doesn't deteriorate, my mind doesn't deteriorate, and I keep going. So those are a couple of the major impediments. I think that another one is uh, the notion that things will just work themselves out if we change our living situation. So it's not unusual. People reach overtime. They may go from a house to apartment. They may go from one part of the country to another and not plan for the fact that there is some adjustment involved. To recognize, hey, this is another phase of life, but one we can look forward to. So if we have this combination of things going together where we're planning, we're looking forward, we're exercising self-discipline, that enables us to win in overtime.
Okay. So let's talk about specifically the planning pace portion of it. Once you get to overtime, you should have planned before, but what kind of planning techniques do you have for people once they get to overtime?
As you indicated, it's always easier to plan if you have started before. In other words, a team that gets to overtime and is suddenly surprised, never expected to be able to be tied at the end of the game. We thought we would lose this game. They haven't adequately planned for the next step. Same thing happens here. So the very fact that you got to overtime means it's not too late to plan. Would have been preferable to set those things before. But again, I always go back to my non-negotiable four. Are you doing something to keep your body active, to own your body in terms of adequate sleep, which is a big one. The fact is, if you don't have to get up at a particular time tomorrow, that means it doesn't matter whether you fall asleep 10 o'clock or 2 a.m. And the reality is that it does matter. Your body does do better with a routine, particularly if you set a routine that seems to work with your internal clock. So uh, again, owning your body, building in some time for meditation, taking advantage of the extra time, and building rational exercise into it. Eating healthy. Uh, this is very important because of the fact that there are many disorders that are related to inadequate nutrition, and you want as much going for you in overtime as you can. Building in plans to keep your mind active. And that may be as simple as building in a reading schedule and say, I'm going to read a variety of books, maybe join a book club or take courses, you know, do something that is going to keep your mind active. And then make sure that you stay socially involved. And this is, as I mentioned before, sometimes people make moves to a nicer climate or to a smaller home or apartment with less responsibilities. It is easier to not reach out to others,
Right.
but you pay a price for it. And the price is loneliness. The price is not having that kind of intellectual and social stimulation that'll keep you going. So, the non-negotiable for that apply through life, particularly apply in overtime. It's not that hard. The fact is for most people, they do these activities, but perhaps on a haphazard basis. And planning means that you are building in a structure so that you're making sure that it is something ongoing. It doesn't have to be burdensome, but it should be ongoing.
It's very, very important in those areas. They talk about the impediments because if you're not planning, you're not eating healthy, you could quickly go downhill, meaning you were so used to a routine at work. You don't challenge yourself enough anymore. You don't eat, you don't exercise. Maybe the exercise you were getting is going up and down the steps at work, right? Or going walking after lunch. But then once you got back to an environment that doesn't have the structure, a lot of people fail, right? When they're at their home more often than when they were at work.
And one of the bad things is this can have a multiplying effect, so that if in fact you don't eat healthy, you wind up feeling less likely to exercise, for example. If you stay up late, you're more likely, you've got more hours in which to uh, eat. And usually, if you eat your normal meals, if you got extra time after that, what you may eat may not be all that healthy. If you don't get adequate sleep, you don't feel that much like socializing with other people. And so again, this has a multiplying effect. And the bottom line that emerges from this is that many older adults have multiple chronic conditions, and that they in themselves have kind of a multiplying effect. It's much more difficult for the body to stay healthy with multiple chronic conditions than with none or one.
Wow. That's so important to look at those things. But you said, and the way you've seen it, right? And that's what really made your mission. You saw some of your colleagues retire before you retired and saw a total change in them after that fact, right?
Yeah, well, everybody who's retired is retired before I retired because I haven't retired. But the way that people handle retirement, and I don't think it's a bad thing for people in general if they're going to stay active, if they're going to uh, use this as true overtime and a time for rejuvenating. But yeah, the one of the things that really got me into kind of shifting the direction of my career is seeing the people who just seem to rely on the course of events and the assumption that old age is a time of decline. And it certainly doesn't have to be that way, but we have to be proactive.
100%. Oh my. So the what recommendations do you give people right once they reach that overtime level, which could be 65, could be 58 if they've retired already? What things should they do right now?
Well, it depends where they are. If we're talking about somebody who's in the process of retiring, then I always encourage that people take kind of a self-audit, an audit of, how are they, uh, how is their current lifestyle and commitment going to uh, incorporate the non-negotiable for? Is there an area that's missing that we can fill it in? If in fact we uh, have gotten into some bad habits, many of us who uh, came up were at a time when working around the clock was a badge of honor. If you have to start restoring sleep at a more regular schedule, you do that. If you've been so busy concentrating on other things in your life, then now's the time to get involved with other activities that bring you in contact with other people. I'm not going to say no two people have the same uh, situations, but most people have very individual situations that if they do an audit, they can plug in. Again, this stuff is not magic. It's not hard to incorporate. It just takes a certain amount of consistency and the mindset that recognizes that this can be a time of growth rather than decline. And if it's a time of growth, then you're going to win in overtime.
All right, Dr. Ron, best place people can go is to your website. They can find it. You can go to your YouTube channel, Growing Older with Enthusiasm. You can go to the Facebook group, Growing Older with Enthusiasm, or you could just check out Rejuvenating podcast, book, all. Check it out by just searching Dr. Ron Kaiser. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.